This episode is brought to you by the American Homebrewers Association, who invites you to give the gift of great beer this holiday season. A gift membership is the perfect way to bring friends and family into the homebrewing hobby, and what's more, you can choose a free book with your gift card purchase. Visit homebrewersassociation.org for details, and make sure to place your order by December 15th to ensure you receive your free book in time for the holidays. homebrewersassociation.org. Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, December 2nd, 2021. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. This week, Steve Wilkes and I take to the porch to sample beers made with different bread yeasts and compare them with one made with US-05. Listen as we toast with beers made with yeast that's usually used in making toast. If you go to basicbrewing.com, you can find archives of our audio and video shows. If you go to basicbrewingshop.com, you can find our DVDs and our Brewers Logbooks. You know, Brewers Logbooks make great Christmas presents. Tell Santa. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Basic Brewing and find our show page on Facebook as well. If you want to support us financially, check out patreon.com/basicbrewing. And thanks to everybody who's helping out in that way. If you go to patreon.com/basicbrewing, you can see a long list of stuff that you can access if you sign up as a supporter. Before we sampled beers on the porch, Steve and I shot 2 video episodes. Financial supporters will see an early release of the first one, along with a behind-the-scenes video this coming Friday. And the general public will see the episode a week later, but they won't see the bonus video. That's just for upper-tier supporters on Patreon. I've been getting some good disaster stories for our annual disaster show. Steve and I are set to get together on December 13th to record that, so get your stories to james@basicbrewing.com before then, please. Congratulations to Julia Hertz, who has been named Executive Director of the American Homebrewers Association. The Brewers Association and the AHA announced that on social media this week. You've heard Julia on this show. She's an experienced homebrewer and has a great depth of knowledge about beer and the craft beer industry, and looking forward to seeing what Julia brings to the AHA in the coming year. Let's take a quick look into the mailbag, shall we? Longtime listener Adam, who I believe is from the Kansas City area, sent me a picture of a beautiful beer. Turns out it was 100% rye beer based on my wacky low-gravity experiments. Adam says it was delicious, so I asked him for details on the batch. And Adam said, with my system for a 5-gallon batch, I used 6 pounds of rye malt, 150-degree Fahrenheit mash for 1 hour, pale ale water profile, Columbus at half an ounce at 60 minutes, and 1.15 ounces of Columbus for a hop stand. Beersmith IBUs show as around 35. S33 yeast, which actually had a Belgian aroma to it until about a month in the keg. Adam says ABV was 2.7%. The mouthfeel and bitterness make it taste like a 5 to 6% juicy pale ale. The only thing I would like is to somehow lower the mouthfeel a bit to make it a little bit crisper, but not sure if that's even possible with 100% rye. Maybe use some alpha amylase? Not sure, Adam says. I really do like this concept. It would be interesting to do a 50-50 pale malt to rye. In this case, 3 pounds of each. The rye would lend to the mouthfeel, and the pale malt would add the sugars needed to get to where I want it. I would also consider hitting it with a large dry hop. Adam says the goal would be to create a 3% IPA that has all the attributes of a 6 to 7% one. I bet you could do that. It sounds like a fun brew, a fun experiment. Lower alcohol with satisfying mouthfeel and lots of hops. I told Adam that if he just wanted to lower the mouthfeel and the ABV, he could simply drop the amount of rye in the recipe, maybe go to 5 pounds instead of 6. Or, like he said, adding in some pale malt would cut that viscosity a bit while probably raising the ABV. I love it. Love it when my little weird experiments inspired people to brew good beers. I'm very excited because I ordered a new pH meter that should arrive today, maybe by the time I finish recording it. I'm listening for the FedEx truck. I broke my other one. I don't know how I did it, but apparently it stopped working. Maybe I didn't maintain the little sensor properly. But anyway, I want to use my new pH meter to make a kettle sour beer with this can of passion fruit puree that I've had forever. And I want to sour my wort with W25 Lacto Brevis from our friends and sponsors at Imperial Organic Yeast. Lacto Brevis is a strain of Lactobacillus brevis, as the name implies. It's extremely hop sensitive, so I plan to make a wort with no hops, with probably American two-row, bring it up to the boil to sanitize, chill it to a temperature that the Lacto Brevis will be happy at, pitch it, and then use my electric system from High Gravity as a sous vide to hold that temperature. I've done that before, and it works real well. And it shouldn't take long to sour that because Imperial says Lacto Brevis will typically drop the wort pH to 3.3 in 1 to 4 days, depending on the temperature and inoculation time. Then it'll be time to boil the wort for just a little while, add a little hops before putting it into the ferment. Ferment with maybe Flagship, something nice and clean from Imperial, and then add the fruit puree in the fermenter, sort of post-fermentation. I'm not going to add it to the keg this time. I'm tired of dealing with the mess, even though it's tasty. Now, I'm really I'm getting excited about this one. We love Imperial Organic Yeast with a pitch rate of 200 billion cells per easy-to-open package. My stir plate is dusty because I don't use it anymore to make starters for moderate gravity 5-gallon batches, and my airlocks are usually bubbling before bedtime. Ask your local homebrew store about W25 Lacto Brevis from Imperial Organic Yeast, and check them out at imperialyeast.com. That's imperialyeast.com. Okay, if you're a longtime listener to the show, we've played with bread yeast a few times, mostly with good results, surprisingly. But I've been curious about the difference between active dry and rapid rise bread yeast. What's the deal with that? And what effect will each of those have in fermenting a beer, especially compared to a beer yeast? Well, that sounds like a sampler. Steve Wilkes, welcome back to Basic Brewing Radio.
Thanks, James. It's a pleasure to be back.
It's apparently spring again here on the porch in northwest Arkansas. It's a beautiful day. We got a little bit of breeze coming through, but I'm here in my shirt sleeves. And we got construction in the background. Hopefully we won't hear that too much, but welcome.
Thanks. Yeah, it's a beautiful, lovely day. I can't get over it. It's going to be like 70 tomorrow, 70 degrees Fahrenheit tomorrow.
Yeah.
So, ooh.
Yeah, we'll be sunbathing. Fair warning.
Yeah.
So we're here to do a sampler, and to be honest with you, I can't remember why I decided to do this particular sampler at this particular time, but for a while, for years, I've been wondering, what's the difference between active dry bread yeast and rapid rise bread yeast? And we've used bread yeast in experiments in the past. We met with Meadman Tim Lieber in San Diego, and he did an experiment comparing bread yeast against 71B, and we like the bread yeast mead better. So it's been in the back of my mind, where do the bread yeast companies get their yeast, and what's the difference between the packages? And so this kind of scratches an itch, whether it'll be, come up with practical applications for brewers afterwards. We'll see, but I'm really curious as to how this will turn out.
Well, I am too. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, to me as a former brew store owner, I would have said, this is complete sacrilege. You would never, ever use grocery store yeast to brew beer with. So I'm anxious to taste these and see, what we think about them. Going into it, without knowing very much, I'm going to say that I would think that the yeast would be a lot more estery, that it wouldn't brew as cleanly, and that's about as much as I know to say about it.
Yeah, and I have to say that I had bought the ingredients for this experiment. I hadn't brewed it yet, but then I looked on my social media feeds, and Brewlosophy did a podcast episode on bread yeast. And so I haven't listened to it because I didn't want to kind of taint what we're doing here.
Yeah.
So go out and find that episode on Brewlosophy, and I'm gonna, after we do this episode, to see, what, and I'm sure theirs is much more well researched than this one is. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they found out. But I swear I didn't get the idea from them. And one of the reasons why I try not to follow I try, I don't want to get into a feedback loop where, I'm kind of doing what other people are doing. I'm kind of trying to do, kind of different stuff. So anyway, kudos to the Brewlosophy guys and, Marshall and them. And hopefully, it'd just be interesting to see what they come up with.
For sure. And, but you've been playing with bread yeast for a long time. I mean, you've brewed a lot of things off and on with bread yeast over the years, as I recall. So, yeah, I'm sure it's an idea that's been kicking around in your head for a long time.
And years ago we made bread with a beer yeast. Do you remember we made a beer with bread yeast and we made bread with USO5? So
yeah,
we've done it both ways,
and they both
so to speak.
Fine. They both came out just fine.
Yeah.
The only reason not to use that I can tell beer yeast in bread is because beer yeast is really expensive, which would be kind of like, why would you do that? But the bread came out fine.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Yeah. It's kind of frivolous to make a loaf of bread out of beer yeast.
$8 or $9 worth of beer yeast. That's one heck of a loaf of bread.
It's all in the name of science. Well, let's before we talk further, let's do sample. Let's sample number one. Cheers, by the way.
Clink.
Thud. As we're using see-through plastic cups this time. I have some definite thoughts about this one. What are you tasting?
The bouquet is lemony. I get some. It smells lemony to me, in a very pleasant way. So it has a pleasant bouquet. The beer tastes pretty good. I get a fairly doughy taste from it. Kind of it's a little bit heavy in the finish, which I wasn't expecting. I'm just going to go out on a limb and say that I think this is probably a bread yeast. But it doesn't taste unpleasant to me. If you poured me a pint of this, I'd be okay with it.
Huh.
So that's about what I know.
To me, and these are they're very cold. I meant to set them out beforehand, but we've been shooting 2 video episodes, one of which was of your 16% ABV sizer.
Yeah. So our judgment may be clouded.
Disclaimer. Giggling may ensue.
Yeah, because right now I'd probably drink a pint of anything after. Yeah, that's great. You got any more of that?
But I get a lot of spice on this one.
Yeah.
I mean, just a ton of spice. I mean, just cloves, just a bunch.
Actually, as soon as you said that, of course, my mind just instantly jumped to farmhouse ales, saisons, things like that. And sure enough, it does kind of go there for sure. Yeah.
Saison would be a good description of this. I mean, it's very... I kind of like it. I'm with you. I like it. It's not bad, but it's got a lot of pepper. It's got a lot of clove. It's just super spicy to me.
Yeah, and I'm assuming that you just used some DME in the recipe. That's all it is.
Good segue. Thank you for the reminder. Yeah, this is the sampler. So I made 3 6-packs of beer. into 3 quarts of water for each of these, or about 3 liters, I put 1 pound or 450 grams of Pilsen Light dry malt extract. I brought that just up to the boil, and then I shut off the heat, and I put into each batch 9 grams of Czech Saz hops at 3.2% alpha acid for a 10-minute steep. So just as the wort started, and I used the thermometer, just as the wort started bubbling, at the boiling point, I shut off the heat, put in the hops, 10-minute steep, chilled it in an ice bath, and then into each of these I pitched 3 grams of the dry yeast, the USO5, and then each of the bread yeast, just because that's what we've done forever. And then it fermented out. The numbers, they all started at 1063, which you would expect for the same recipe with an extract. The USO5 finished out at 1010 for an ABV of 7.0%. The Fleischmann's, and we're using Fleischmann's Active Dry and Fleischmann's Rapid Rise yeasts. So the Active Dry finished out at 1014 as opposed to 1010 for an ABV of 6.4%, and the Rapid Rise also finished at 1014 for an ABV of 6.4%. So the beer yeast did a better job of fermenting the wort down to the finishing gravity, and the 2 bread yeasts were the same. Now maybe I'll just hold that for a second while we talk about. I don't want to lump in all the real information together in one in one lump, but you're continuing to taste number 1. Any more feedback?
Just that. I don't know. No, not really. It tastes good, and I actually just took a drink of it because it tasted good, and so I don't have any problem with this. I think that it makes me. Of course, I probably wouldn't do this, but it's kind of like I kind of want to try one now that's got wheat, a little more a more complex full grain bill that you might brew in reality. Right. And then ferment it with whatever this yeast is. Of course, it'll turn out to be the USO5, but but assuming it's a bread yeast, that it really brews an interesting beer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's and I tasted these at bottling time, and I think when I tasted at bottling time, I was like, I'm going to be able to tell this apart. So I have an advantage over you, but Susan, we bottled these together, and Susan randomized these, and put duct tape over the caps, so we don't know what we're tasting. And my dog got sprayed by a skunk. Like, what was it? A couple weeks ago? I don't know. It's been a while, and she's had like 3 baths. One with the hydrogen peroxide, dish soap, and baking soda. The early morning that she got sprayed, and then twice since then. Feminine wash products.
Oh my gosh!
So, and she still stinks. I think she's just gonna stink.
Well, yeah, there you go. I would never have thought of using that. Like, I won't say brand names, but
right. Well, it was a suggestion on Facebook, and it did help. She stinks less than she did, but she's still kind of stinks, and she's sitting right next to me. So if I say one of the beers is skunked, it might be her.
Okay.
So let's taste number 2.
Beer number 2.
Our friends and sponsors Desiree and Dave from High Gravity in Tulsa are having a sale on money. That's right. If you go to highdgravitybrew.com, all gift certificates for a limited time are 10% off. So you can get a $100 gift certificate for $90, a $40 gift certificate for $36, and a $75 gift certificate for $67.50. You get the idea. It's a great time to tell Santa to load up a cart with highdgravitybrew.com gift certificates. They make great virtual stocking stuffers because you can use them to get beer ingredients, beer ingredient kits, wine kits, and fantastic equipment like a Warthog electric brewing system from highdgravitybrew.com to start off your new year in style. It's only for a limited time. The 10% discount will be taken automatically at checkout. So it's easy. Tell Santa to help you take the pain out of propane and stock up on ingredients and other good stuff with a 10% off gift certificate in the denomination of your choosing at family-owned and operated highdgravitybrew.com. That's highdgravitybrew.com.
Okay, beer number 2, I get a lot of banana.
I'm with you.
And so I'm happy to see you. I got a banana in my pocket. That's actually really good. I'm very surprised. I thought I wasn't going to like these at all.
Right.
So I've had 2 of them. So at least one of them has to have been the Fleischmann's yeast, and I thought, oh, this isn't going to be good. This will not end well.
Yeah.
But this is actually really good, and as opposed to the first one, it is different. Mm-hmm. And this one I kind of get like a German wheat beer out of it.
Yeah.
If you had blindfolded me and asked me to taste this, I would have thought it was a Hefeweizen, because it does have a ton of banana, and it's got some clove as well. It doesn't have as much clove as the first one. The first one is super spicy to me, but there's some like clove and cinnamon and banana in the second one that is really like, holy smokes, that's a tasty beer.
I like that a lot. Mm-hmm. I think that's really good. It's I've got banana, I've got lemon. Okay, you're not going to like this. Uh-oh. But I get a little bit of that Halloween banana candy. I know, but in a good way. I get just a little. It's just got that little bit of that Halloween thing going, and I like that candy though.
That's my least favorite candy,
and it's one of my favorites. So it kind of reminds me of that.
Oh, I like that. I like that quite a bit. Okay, so now let's talk about the performance. I didn't, put a timer on these or anything, but I bottled or pitched these, in the early afternoon, and by bedtime, the Rapid Rise one was going to town. Wow. It was really going. And then the next day, the Active Dry bread yeast kind of picked up after that. And the USO5, surprisingly, was kind of the slowest one to get started, really. And it was the last one to finish. The bread yeasts, the Rapid Rise finished within like 2 days. It was done. Wow. The Active Dry was, maybe a day after that. The USO5 showed signs of fermentation like maybe 3, 4, 5 days. I didn't keep a log, but it definitely did take a slower amount of time to get finished. They were all in the same room, all on the same floor. Mm-hmm. And but obviously the bread yeast did a better job at converting all those, converting the starches into sugars. But the bread yeast, boy, they really got after it in a hurry.
Well, that all kind of makes sense. I mean, and with the numbers that they came up, the USO5 fermenting out to be the driest of the 3 makes sense. And the USO5 has been cultured to eat those particular sugars that are found in beer wort, where the bread yeast, not so much. So that all kind of makes sense to me that it would. I'm not so sure it makes sense that it took longer to activate. I'm not sure. I'm not enough of an expert about that, but it makes sense that it would ferment longer, and that the Rapid Rise would kind of proof out and be done. So
well, the bread yeast job is to make carbon dioxide as fast as possible,
right?
Or not as fast as possible, but its main job is to make bubbles,
right?
Is to make bubbles in the CO2 in the dough. and to add flavor, in a certain, like a sourdough yeast, adds a certain amount of flavor as well. But the main job of the bread yeast is to make pockets of air, essentially, and to generate CO2.
Yeah, and for sure. And the USO5's main job is to eat all those sugars and give you a really clean fermentation that's going to, and particularly that strain is actually designed for that too. So It's been cultured to give you a really clean, thorough fermentation.
Right. So I did some extensive research through Google on the on the bread yeasts. I Googled what's the difference between active dry and rapid rise yeasts, and I found an article on masterclass.com. And it says, what is active dry yeast? Active dry yeast is a granulated dehydrated powder used in many baking forms. The most common yeast you'll find at grocery stores is individual packets, blah-de-blah. Commercial active dry yeast is made by introducing wild yeasts to molasses and starch, cultivating and continuously sterilizing the resulting yeast sludge, which is then dried and granulated. Is that, I don't know if that's true. They're not like cultivating their house strain of bread yeast batch to batch. They're just like letting Mother Nature take its course, and then.
Well, unless I'm completely speculating, so free and worth every penny. That's it. But if you start to have a house yeast and you just let the air do its thing in your facility, in your yeast house, then I guess you could argue in both directions and still be accurate. That yes, we're just letting Mother Nature do it, but the preponderance of yeast in this space is going to be this kind of house yeast, kind of like a Belgian brewery would do it. So, and again, I just made that up, but that kind of makes sense to me.
But in that instance, could it? I mean, and again, this is pulled freshly out of my nether regions, but but if this is the way that they harvest the yeast, according to masterclass.com, maybe the yeast is going to be different from batch to batch, and depending on when you buy it, and maybe from different times of year, whether what kind of stuff is in the air. Yeah. I don't know, but active dry yeast, you're encouraged to hydrate before pitching, and the instant yeast, according to masterclass.com, is a fast-acting yeast sold under various names such as rapid rise, bread machine yeast, or quick rise. It undergoes the same culturing and drying process as active dry yeast, except it is milled into even finer granules before packaging, eliminating the need for dissolving it in water before using. It's occasionally produced with additional enzymes like ascorbic acid, also known as a dough conditioner, to speed up the rising process. And so I looked on the label of the Fleischmann's yeast, and the rapid rise does have ascorbic acid. Now, apparently that enzyme, if that is an enzyme, didn't work on the starches in the beer, because it fermented out at this, it finished out at the same level.
Right. Yeah. Wow. Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't have a bit of insight on that, but that, huh.
So that's interesting to me that that the reason you don't need to proof it or to hydrate it is because it's ground finer in the, and I think it's more shelf stable as well.
I'll be darned. Well, that's way more than I knew about bread yeast than when I got on the porch, but the finer milling kind of makes sense in that now you've got more surface area to allow the yeast to do its thing more quickly. That makes sense to me. I always think of rapid rise yeast as like yeast I'm going to make pizza dough out of.
Oh yeah.
Which I don't know why, but I do. Yeah. And then there's normal yeast is just for bread. for regular loaves of bread. But
Well, rapid rise or pizza making, you're usually kind of more in a hurry probably than making a loaf of bread.
well, I am because
You're hungry.
I'm hungry. I got the munchies, and there ain't nothing in the cupboard.
And you use the rapid rise stuff in the bread machine because I remember when I had a bread machine, you just sprinkle all the dry ingredients. You put all the dry ingredients in there on top of some liquid, and you sprinkle the yeast on top of all that, and you set the timer, and it, there's not a proofing process, so to speak. There's no hydration of the yeast,
Right.
and so it works like that. You're a more accomplished bread maker than I am.
Well, I used to make bread a lot, but in these days of low carb, I've kind of had to have bread or beer, and you know which way I lean. So, but I miss baking bread, and I love bread. I love to bake bread as well as eat it, and used to make it all the time. And for all of our pizza gurus out there, yes, the best pizza dough is made very slowly. You actually let it rise in the refrigerator. You let it rise very slowly, and you get a much finer dough out of it. So just letting you know, I know that.
Yeah, years and years ago, and forgive me, I don't remember the guest's name, but I did a show on bread, and maybe I'll remember to look it up, and after the interview I'll put it in. But this guest sent me a recipe for focaccia, in which I kind of made the dough the night before and kind of lagered in the refrigerator, and it slowly rose in the colder temperature and developed more interesting flavors. And I need to make focaccia again. It was so good. That recipe was so good. Okay, so we need to taste number 3. The interview I was referring to about bread was with John Owen way back on January 10th, 2008. And the episode title, if you're looking through the archives, is Sourdough Bread. That was a fun show. And we'll get back to the sampling with Steve in just a minute, but I want to tell you that after we got done with the episode, we shared a couple of meads on the porch from our friends and sponsors, Ricky and Kelly from Groenfell and Havoc Meaderies in Vermont. So delicious. Steve was very impressed, and I sent him home with an assorted 4-pack from my collection that I got through the shipping from Groenfell the other day. Well, mead maker Ricky tells me that there are now 3 special holiday feast mead bundles available at Groenfell.com that you can get shipped to you. There's the Flight of the Bee bottle and can combo, which has Valkyrie's Choice, Nordic Farmhouse, Psychopomp, and a 750-milliliter bottle of Winter Warmer, which is based on a 17th century wassail. Then there's the We All Cook Together bundle, featuring Hop Swarm for prepping the meal, Valkyrie's Choice for serving, Wild Hunt for dessert, and Old Wayfarer for telling stories afterwards. And finally, the All-Day Affair, comprised of Bragg Eye, Hagir, Starry Ulsa, and the Winter Warmer. Now that's a delicious journey meant to be shared with friends and family. Make your holidays sweet and special, but not too sweet. Check out all the craft mead deliciousness at family-owned and operated Groenfell.com. That's Groennfell. Tastes like a beer.
Tastes like a beer. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that this is a USO5. Mm-hmm. It's clean as a whistle.
Yeah.
It tastes like a beer.
Yeah. Super nice. Super clean. And we have to say that the USO5 is I believe the Chico strain, yep, which I believe comes from Sierra Nevada, which is in Chico, California, yep, and was the prominent American ale yeast forever, just because it gets out of the way and it lets the hops sing, so to speak.
I'm not going there.
Bonanza reference. But I do get some like fruitiness from the hops, even though they're Czech Sots.
Yep.
they were added at a 10-minute steep. The hop character is nice. The malt character is super clean. It's just a super cleanly fermented beer. So I think that we agree that this is probably the beer yeast.
Yeah, I'll be shocked if it's not. But stranger things have happened. But this beer tastes as exactly as I would have expected it to taste, and also your reference to it being USO5 being, or the Chico strain being the most dominant. I can tell you from owning the store that I probably sold 5 packs of USO5 to every other. It's by far and away the most used strain of yeast, regardless of who you buy, who's made it. But I happen to sell the Saf Ale, so it's USO5.
Delicious.
Yeah.
Very super clean. I would drink that beer all day long. These other beers are delicious, but in my mind, I would enjoy a pint of each of those, but I wouldn't want a second pint that day.
I agree completely. As much as we kind of fawned over them, they have just enough of a wang or something's a little askew that makes me go, I really like that. Now give me a Sierra Nevada Pale Ale.
Well, and similar like a Saison, I love a Saison and I love a Hefeweizen, but you give me, say, a boot of Hefeweizen. The next boot is going to be like a Fest beer or a Pilsner or something that's going to be cleaner, because too much is too much.
I'm the same way. Yeah.
So let's go back and revisit 1 and 2.
Okay.
Just to, now that they've warmed up a little bit. Wow. Number 1. Holy smokes. That's like Christmas spice. It's got nutmeg and clove, and it's just a freaking holiday candle. We tasted your sizer on the show, and it had spices put in it, but they were more delicate and balanced than this is. I mean, I could drink a lot of your sizer. This as it warms up, the spices are just like, holy smokes. I didn't put any spice in this, but I swear it tasted like it did.
It definitely has a lot of spice, and it's definitely opened up as it's warmed a little bit. And wow. Well, Christmas spice was my favorite Spice Girl. She
was seasonal, though.
She was seasonal. She was basic.
I'm going to take a sip of water and go for number 2.
Mm.
Oh, my.
I like that. Mm-hmm. I like that a lot. Now, to go back on my statement of I wouldn't want to drink a lot of it, it is just a little off somehow. But, wow, that's really that banana boat thing is coming through like gangbusters. Both of these have opened up, and the esters that we're tasting are much stronger.
Yeah. I disagree with you that it's off.
Well,
I don't taste any off flavors, but they are strong phenolic beer characters.
Yeah, off would have been the wrong word, and I get that I needed a better word than that.
If it were an American Pale Ale, I'd say yes, it's off.
I think that's kind of maybe what I meant was that compared to the control beer, there's something not happening that shouldn't be happening. But boy, they're really good.
Yeah, lots of banana and clove. There's still a lot of spice there, but I think banana and clove. Okay, so I'm going to reveal to you what my taste perceptions were at bottling time.
Okay.
I thought the Rapid Rise was super spicy. I thought the Active Dry was spicy, but not so much.
Okay.
And I thought the USO5 was just like a standard American Pale Ale. So that was my sensory perception at that time. It doesn't mean that it's translated into, after they've been through secondary fermentation in the bottle, but I think So I think you know where I'm leaning.
Yeah, and I'm going to absolutely agree with you that number 1 would be the rapid rise, number 2 would be the standard active dry, and number 3 would be the USO 5.
Yeah.
It's just based on everything we've said over the course of the episode.
So let's start with number 3 since we agree on number 3.
Okay.
Well, we agree on all of them, but it's obvious what that one is.
Oh gosh, it's White Labs 1025. It's the Belgian surprise. Oh wait, it's upside down. It's the USO 5.
It's quite obvious.
Yeah, if we'd have got that wrong, I'd have just hung it up. I mean, yeah, that's clearly a beer yeast and clearly a cleanly fermented beer.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay, and number 2 we're saying is the active dry.
The AD.
Oh, well, okay. And then number one, just to make sure, is going to be the rapid rise.
Nope, it's Imperial Bubbles.
No, it's the RR.
It's the RR.
Right. Wow.
Oh, we got it exactly right. So
Yeah.
that makes me feel a little better because usually we get them completely wrong.
Yeah, I told Susan after we bottled these, I said, I think I can get these. These at bottling time, they were very different. But I liked all 3. I'm surprised that number 1, I'm surprised that they are so different, and then I'm surprised that I do like all 3.
Yeah, and it makes me think about how come we like them. In other words, I'm predisposed to say that bread yeast won't make good beer. I mean, that's my hypothesis, and clearly, in both of our opinions, that's not true. These are actually quite drinkable, and given a full grain bill, full hop build, whatever, that you could make a really good beer with either one. So why wouldn't you do that? Well, I don't know for sure, but I can say that if you're using a Kveik yeast or a real Saison like BE 134, I think from Safeo.
What's the imperial?
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to
The rustic, or
or
gnome,
or gnome. Yeah, if you're using a real, a true Saison yeast, I think you'd still have a more complex beer. You'd still have a beer that would be judged higher. I wouldn't start using bread yeast for your national homebrew competitions. That said, these are good beers, and I wouldn't be. It wouldn't kill me if I had a moment of panic where I made the wort and, oh my God, I forgot to buy yeast, or my yeast is dead, and it's Saturday night. What am I going to do? Oh, I've got some bread yeast. I think I'd be perfectly comfortable to go ahead and pitch just some bread yeast and let it be what it's going to be. I mean, I might not want to do that again, but I wouldn't. But as opposed to having no beer or losing the beer, well, I'd use the bread yeast.
Well, here's my thing. If the masterclass article is true, and that they're just like taking wild yeast out of the air and fermenting, sugars, it may be a crapshoot as to what you get, because when we made the beer with the bread yeast back in the day, I don't remember saying, "Ooh, this tastes, phenolic-y," or "This tastes, fruity," or that, I remember it as just like kind of more clean.
Very good point. I think that you're right. I mean, if you're just basically pulling out of the air and then kind of making a starter and then dehydrating that starter, you're right. It's going to be whatever it is, whenever it is. But I can only go on, what I have in front of me, and based on that, I'd be okay. But you're right, and I think that is another argument for using good quality, purposely grown, well labeled trusted sources. You know, whether you're using beer yeast or wine yeast or whatever you're doing, that there's a good reason to do that, and you know what you're going to get.
And if the only difference between the active dry and the rapid rise is that the rapid rise is ground finer and maybe has some ascorbic acid in it, then theoretically they should taste the same, only one works faster. But that's not what we found here. We found that they taste radically different from each other.
Yeah, and that backs up your theory of how the yeast is collected or propagated to begin with.
So I guess the bottom line in my mind is that in this instance we made some tasty beers with each of these yeasts, but would I be comfortable in replicating it with a 5 or 10 gallon batch? No. No. What I might do is make a 6-pack as kind of a starter, taste it, and maybe translate that into a 5 gallon batch. I don't know. Maybe that would work. Maybe it wouldn't.
Sure, it'd work if as long as you liked what you got from your 6-pack. But to me, it's like, why do that? I mean, why wouldn't you just get a pack of Imperial Flagship or whatever and just use that? I mean, why would you go to that trouble other than you just wanted to? It's just part of the hobby, and that's okay too. Mm-hmm. If you kind of know why you're doing it, because I want to, and it's my hobby. But in terms of the quality of the beer, etc., I think stick with good commercial stuff.
Yeah. And it's not just because we're sponsored by Imperial Organic Yeast.
Not at all. Not at all. I mean, and a lot of guys, love to bank their yeast, and they kind of end up propagating. They have their own house yeast ultimately because they've done it for so long. There's nothing wrong with that. If that's what makes you, happy in terms of how you approach the hobby, then you should definitely do that. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not one of those kind of brewers, though. I kind of like to open my packet fresh every time. I have a lot of confidence in it. I'm not a biologist. In fact, I had to take biology like 3 times in college. So, I'm not the guy to do that. So I'd rather trust the people that do that well, and then let me do the part that I do well.
Yeah. Yeah. So can you make delicious beers from bread yeast, dried bread yeast? Yeah. This time. But I didn't know what I was going to get. Was I happy with the results? Yeah. I think these are tasty beers. Each one of those is a tasty 6-pack, that I will gladly share with you if you desire. But when it comes time to repeating a recipe or finding something that gives you predictable results from a professional, whatever, we love Imperial, but buy your yeast where you're gonna, they have their master samples maintained under pristine conditions. Right. You know what you're going to get, and if you're making something that you don't want to be, a crapshoot, then you get what you're after.
Yeah, I'm not gonna take a crapshoot on $40 or $50 worth of grain.
Yeah, I'm
gonna use some yeast I know that works.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and if you're adding a bunch of hops or some candy sugar or whatever, it's going to be, if you're going to brew a big old Belgian and you want it to taste like the number one, which is a delicious beer, I'm not going to spend $80 or whatever on 5 gallons of beer just to throw some bread yeast in there. So, so in the bottom line, this is a fun experiment, and will I use bread yeast again? Sure, I think it'd be fun. Will I use it on a full batch of beer? Maybe not. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. But like I said, I have to do the caveat. If it's Saturday night and it's 10 o'clock at night and you've done all the work and suddenly you realize I ain't got no yeast, I might be tempted to throw it in there and just and let that be what it is.
Depends on how many of your 16% ciders I've had.
There you go.
Well, Steve, this has been a ton of fun. And I'm still not cold. I'm sitting out here in the shirt sleeves. The sun is going. I may have to get a jacket here soon, but it's the end of the year. Oh, we got our disaster show coming up. We got to record here in a couple of weeks. We got to figure out when we're doing that. If you haven't sent any of your disaster show entry yet, I don't want to talk about what we're planning, but you and I talked briefly on the texts about something special we're going to do this year. I don't want to overpromise. I don't want to, but anyway, maybe I should shut up. Steve, I appreciate your friendship as always, primarily over everything else. Even if we didn't do this ever again, get together over beers, I hope that we would still be friends and find another excuse to get together. But it's always a pleasure to get together with you and to sample stuff and to have a few laughs. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, James. It's been a lot of fun today. Appreciate it.
Well, thanks again to Steve for hanging out on the porch. That was a fun and surprisingly tasty sampler. And just a heads up, for scheduling purposes, my son Drew's coming home for the holidays, so I'm going to take an additional week off this year. And so I'll post a show next week, and then we'll be back on the last week of the year for the disaster show. If you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or want to say howdy, write to james@basicbrewing.com or just fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com. And please don't forget to tell us where you're from. Check out our mobile-friendly shop at basicbrewingshop.com and tell Santa you want a logbook for Christmas. Thanks to everybody supporting us through our Patreon page. Special goodies coming your way. Check that out at patreon.com/basicbrewing. It's all until next time. Until then, thanks for listening, everybody. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio, and our website is brought by Kelly Dodson. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. In the meantime, stay well and stay tuned. So long.